Welcome to the Natural Hair Education Podcast, where we empower, educate, and embrace our essence through the love of natural hair. I am your host, Corinthian Carruthers II, and thank you for listening. I am a licensed beauty educator, licensed cosmetologist, and natural hair culturist. I am co-owner of Creative Hair School of Cosmetology and the creator of Natural Hair Education, a platform that's designed and dedicated to teaching beauty school students, professional stylists, and natural hair enthusiasts texture hairstyling and natural hair education. On this platform, we will discuss real hair stories, break myths, and grow in self-love. This episode is brought to you by Natural Hair Education's Texture on Texture styling course. This styling course is a virtual educational experience. Learn how to properly detangle hair, learn how to do coils, flat twists, two-strand twists, and an updo style, all on naturally textured hair. In this program, you will receive Ada, which is Natural Hair Education's first texture hair mannequin. And listen, y'all, she is the real deal, okay? So once you get your hands on her, you'll be able to learn the different types of skills and techniques, as well as improve your current skills, increase your service time, along with your confidence, and overall increase your income. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Natural Hair Education Podcast. Now, a few years ago, I released a podcast series called the Queedom Care. And Queedom Care was built on several pillars that was to help support the woman. And those pillars were body, mind, spirit, space, and money. And for each of those topics, I had a special guest come on, and that guest elaborated more on that specific topic. I wanted to start a new Queedom Care series, and I sought out a specific guest that I wanted to have on the show. Well, we recorded the podcast episode, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to use that episode for the Queedom Care series or just for the Natural Hair Education Podcast, because the information for both topics were very, very much valuable. Well, I recently came across the episode, and I wanted to get the episode out because it was so good. And I believe that this will help support you in both self-care as well as hair care. So my next guest is Felicia Johnson McGhee. An interaction with Felicia's soothing yet empowering energy is sure to leave an impression upon initial contact. As a stress recovery educator and beauty wellness practitioner, she artfully blends her unique skill to soothe stress and deliver healing hair care in a way that serves her clients with compassion, care, and confidence. As a proud alumni of Creative Hair School of Cosmetology, Felicia cultivates texture hair with care and creativity. Her stress-soothing, inclusive approach to all textures increases her clients' confidence to embrace and wear their distinct hair fabric with joy and pride. Felicia's greatest joy is to help her clients see the beauty, enjoy the flexibility, and radiate the glory of their crown. Welcome to the Natural Hair Education Podcast, Felicia. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Good. I'm glad to have you here today. Before we get into you, as we just briefly spoke, I did want to share with you publicly that I didn't know if I should have you on for the Queedom Care series or Natural Education Podcast series, because you are so informative when it comes to both areas, when it comes to our Queedom Care, which covers 5 pillars: your body, mind, spirit, space, and money. And I wanted to really hone in that aspect with you because I feel like you are so intuitive, you're so wise, you're so articulate when it comes to speaking to the inner voice of a woman and bringing out that power that she has within that she doesn't even recognize that she has. So I did want to speak to you about that, but you are also informative and educated in the scalp and hair. So, we'll just flow and see where this episode takes us. But before we get into anything, I do want you to introduce yourself and tell the people who you are.
Well, thank you so much for this pre-conversation, I just want to share I'm Felicia Johnson McGhee, and I wear a few different hats. I am, of course, a natural hair cultivation specialist, which I began my education at the Creative Hair School of Cosmetology. Woo woo! One of the best places in the world, in my opinion. I also am a community health worker, and I serve to assist birthing moms in maternal infant health through the Revive Health Community Center. I'm a workshop facilitator there. I also work for the Genesee County Chamber at Teen Quest. So I help teach leadership to youth and employment skills. And so I wear a few different hats along with some of the things that I'm cooking up on my own. And so I'm very much an enthusiast of mental health, and I'm a stress and wellness educator, an advocate, as well as just, a woman on the path and journey of just becoming the best version of myself.
And that's what I love about you. I've watched you. Now, I've known you for a while. And we didn't really get to know each other until the natural hair program started. And you came in, you're like, listen, I want to do this program. And we got you going, got you started, and you are doing amazing things. But one thing about being in that program, you know how you think you're in it for one thing. And for me, I'm thinking I'm in it to teach. But you were you were such a blessing to me. And every time you spoke, I felt like this is a safe place. You shared so much wisdom. And it was just through, like, all this conversations that we had was just supposed to be through just natural hair, just learning natural hair. But it went so much deeper than that. And I do feel like natural hair is deeper than just what we see on the exterior, that it has a lot to do with our inner person. And so speaking of that, this goes twofold. You do work with stress.
Yes.
And so I know, like, in today's world, we as women, we're so busy. You're so busy. We have so much that we're obligated to, and people count on us for a ton of things. And so my question to you is, how do you, just in your personal life, help deal with the day-to-day stresses, things that you're obligated to, that people are expecting of you? And sometimes you might feel overwhelmed. How do you find those little increment times or things in your life to help you relieve the stress?
This is something that, let me first say that working to serve others and to show up the way we want to in the world is something in and of itself a great privilege, but also something that can definitely be a great expenditure of energy, right? It's like you're showing up for people. But one of the things that I'm becoming even more aware of in this season of my life is that showing up for myself first is so, so, so important. And I just was meditating on this before this call, and that so many of my relationships are changing in their dynamic. And the thought came up inside of me, Felicia, have you really made time to be your own friend? If you were someone seeking out friendship, would you want to be friends with you? And so as I considered that, in answer to your question, one of the major things that we must get our head wrapped around, and I know it's becoming a bit of a buzzword, but self-care. Making time for ourselves, putting ourselves first, and putting ourselves on the schedule. And that's something that what that's looking like for me in daily life is making a schedule, something that I was averse to growing up. Not because I just didn't want to do it. I didn't grow up in a way where that was a part of my context or construct. So making a schedule, to being mindful of where you are, who you're with, and what's happening when you're in that space. And then the other thing, continuing to learn how to take care of ourselves. What is self-care? For some people, maybe it is getting their nails done in bubble bath. But for me, I've learned that it is learning to sit in the quiet, sit in the space where I can hear my own voice resonate. And the reason that that's important is because sometimes our brains can take off, like a race car, and it can be driving us forward. And that slowdown gives us the space to say, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Is this really good for me? Is this healthy for me? Am I taking care of myself? And that's something that I'm working at every day. I practice in self-care. Absolutely.
That's funny that you said that's something that you thought about today and meditated about. I had a meeting this morning, and on my way to the meeting, I am asking myself questions. Okay, how are you showing up? How are you presenting yourself? Just the basic questions of, I guess, that mindfulness that sometimes we don't take into consideration. We kind of just get up and go and just do and just be, and not taking the time to really put thought into it, being more conscious about that. And then how we interact with others, asking yourself questions. So I'm there. And I feel like this last year, I'm going to get a little personal real quick, but this last year has been really difficult for me. And that I was with someone for over 10 years, and that relationship came to a halt and it ended. And at the end of that relationship, I started asking myself all these questions, like, I questioned everything. I questioned myself. I questioned my value. I questioned my worth. And it led me down a spiral, but that spiral was a good spiral. It actually took me on a path of doing the inner work. And I feel like a lot of times us as women, when we go through things, no matter what it is, we tend to, in that moment, lose our worth, lose our value. And then we look down upon ourselves, and then we stay there. And we don't find the strength, or we don't have the support to catapult us forward. And so we stay there. And so, I was grateful for the support that I had. I had therapy, I had conversations, I had time in nature. I mean, like, all those things served me well. And that's part of this podcast series as well, is really giving women the tools to be able to implement in their own lives, and even just the conversations. Hearing conversations can sometimes help us in having us move forward in our life. And so mindfulness is huge for me. That's something that I try to do on a regular, and just really, just not so much question myself, but ask myself, why am I thinking like that? Like, what is that root cause? Or it can be good or bad, but I just want to know where it stemmed from. I feel like that has been a really a good component in me moving my life forward and feeling good about myself, and even looking good, like doing the work, doing what it takes to make yourself a better person. And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's about for me. It's becoming a better person each and every day, and being an example to those around me. And speaking of examples, I've watched you. I've watched you over the years, and in these past few years, you have really stood out and just captivating with your presence. You're gentle. You can convey very well. Like I said, you can speak to that woman on the inside and pull out that strength, help her see the strength within herself. And so my next question is, what type of work have you done specifically to just be able to pull yourself up in order to be an example for those around us?
Well, I do want to add these three key words that are part of the work that I do with myself. And that is, I am learning to meet myself with compassion, to meet myself with curiosity, and to meet myself with consciousness. Now, believe it or not, as you spoke, you talked about this, right? You really did talk about this. When we begin to question ourselves about, like, why is this happening in my life? Why do I feel this way? Why have I made these choices, right? That's the curiosity. But the compassion, too, to realize that what you did at the time, or how you behaved, or what's happening in your life, to take off the boxing gloves, stop beating ourselves up. What you did was what you knew to do. And then consciousness, right? Which I share this with many women, is that this is my opinion, you can only inform others. You cannot give people awareness. We hear the word awareness and we think we can make people aware, but awareness is a work of the internal. right? Information is a work of the external. You can hear things and be inspired. And then what happens is you become motivated inside to consider or contemplate how you want to change. And so to answer your question, prefacing it with that, some of the work that I've done has been therapy, along with special therapy techniques from different types of therapy that might help me to release emotions, tapping, hypnosis. Those are some of the things that have helped me because I do have a deep trauma history that I won't necessarily go in and hear, but I can say that if we were to put abuse in several realms, I've probably experienced abuse in most of them: physical, mental, sexual, verbal, spiritual. I've experienced abuse across the spectrum. So some of that healing work started with me just having therapeutic approaches, medical therapeutic approaches. I've also had a medication as a part of my regimen. But the other thing that I have been doing and continue to do is to gather and utilize tools to help me. Journaling and writing have been that. I do have a published work that is my autobiography. I also currently I'm in the mindfulness stress-based program through the CRIM. That's something I'm doing right now because as much as I read and learn, I still have to get into the practice. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything that I would share with people, gathering information and data does not equate to change. You can have all of the knowledge and the tools be presented, but without the small actionable steps that you can utilize every day to implement those things, you won't really see the benefits. So one of the things I've been doing now is really working at my self-care, which means that I got a yoga mat and I got a meditation pillow, and I've started to practice these things so that I can bring harmony to myself from the overwhelm that I feel.
That's good. And I've been doing the same thing, like putting all that theory into practice, like actually doing the work. I like my Sundays, my family know. Everybody that's a part of my life knows. Don't call, text, bother Corinthian on Sunday. Okay. I am journaling, I am meditating, I am stretching, I am doing whatever whatever it is I have to do to prepare myself for the week and for myself. So, those and it goes beyond that, but that's just the primary basis. I have a day to myself. Okay. So my Sundays they belong to me.
Yeah, I used to do these workshops a few years ago before the pandemic called the Why Workshop, and the Why standing for Writing Heals You. And one of the things that I used to encourage the women to realize two things actually, and that is, one, you should put yourself on the schedule. We have schedules, you should be on your schedule. If you have a scheduled book, if you got a schedule in your phone, however you have a schedule, you should put yourself on that schedule. And two, to disable the idea that sacrifice equals neglect. Sacrifice does not equal neglect. When we think about sacrifice, it's been put in context to us the way we've been reared, that if I sacrifice and help people because I should do that, that somehow I should go lacking. But sacrifice does not equal neglect. Actually, we have to unlearn that and realize that the more you take care of you, I heard Ayana talk about filling the cup until it's overflowing. Well, what happens is when the cup overflows, then whatever comes out of the cup is going to touch others. We often don't have that model that I'm going to fill myself up and then I'll have something for other people. I can tell you, even right now, I'm being very honest. I'm aware that I have been operating out of deficit. And when you operate out of deficit, it's going to show up somewhere. To connect this with hair care, I tell women when they sit in my chair, believe it or not, the hair, among other places, is a great space to start to realize that something is out of sync and balance with me. When you start realizing that your scalp is itchy, your hair is getting thin, maybe you pull on your hair or twist your hair unconsciously, which is something that can be indicative of having nervous stress and anxiety. People even chew their hair and can eat their hair. There's a word for it. I can't think of it right now, but I know what it is. I mean, all of these things, I often tell women, your hair and scalp is a great way to say, whoa, let me see what's going on with myself. So when the women sit in my chair and we do a scalp assessment, I start to gather data from them. I listen to them. What experience are they having with their hair and their scalp? And for most of us, we don't, I mean, even though we hear the term stress, we don't equate it with that. We just don't make the connection. But your scalp is an excellent place to watch, observe, to identify what's happening in my world and how am I being affected by it, right? Scalp is a good place to see that. And so, and the thing is that it also gives us an opportunity to be curious, right? We're curious, like, we'll go so far and we'll ignore something until it's visibly an issue.
Yeah.
I had a client in just recently and she came in for a treatment and she said, I've been noticing that I'm thin around the front I'm starting to be thin. And she's a younger person. And, my question is, tell me a little bit about what's been happening in your life lately. Approaching the work with empathy and holding space to hear what's happening. And actually doing that in all arenas, but particularly when people are in our chair, this is a space that can be vulnerable. It's like being at a bar and you're a bartender, right? It's a space where people have trusted you and they open up to you about themselves in ways that they might not in any other space. I tell people I tell my clients, look at your hair care appointment as self-care time, not just because you're going to leave cute, but this is the time when you got the space. You lay back in that bowl and just mindfully think about that water, beginning to loosen up the things that are sticking to you and actually beginning to rinse them away. And like I put my clients in that mindset, and when they like, man, I didn't even know that I was going to talk about this or experience this, but that I deeply connect my work with mental health and stress recovery with my hair care work.
And that is why I was confused today about this episode, because I'm like, you do so much, and you made so many powerful points just now. And I think it's an honor. Your clients should be honored to have you as a hairstylist because you're conscious, you're aware, and you're looking for ways to help them become more aware and just release that stress and have a place to let go of their worries and communicate and be in a safe, sacred space. So I commend you for that. And like, I just didn't know if I should go down the Queedom Care series or I should talk about natural hair care. But let's talk about natural hair care, because I do feel like as a hairstylist, for one, we hold a lot of power when it comes to servicing our client, just through our energy, our conversation, how we show up, how we service them. All of that is very important. And when it comes to the clients, choosing a hairstylist as well is one of the most important things that I feel like they could do, because again, that's energy being exchanged. That's a lot of things that are happening in that space. People are opening up. They're sharing their personal life. They're sharing things that are going well for them that are not going so well. And so that space in itself is very sacred. And then you specializes in hair and scalp health. And so you're able to identify, okay, this person is having some type of trauma or something is happening in her life. Let me dig a little deeper and find out what's going on. Let me dig a little deeper and find out how I could help serve her, to help with these concerns that her hair and scalp may be having that she may not even know. But a lot of times, like you said, they'll wait until it's too late, or not too late, but they'll wait until it's noticeable to then try to take action on it. So before we get into the hair aspect, let's just share with me some of the things that you've done to educate yourself to become more educated in the hair and in the scalp.
Well, one of the things I've done, and I'm looking to do more of, is I've went into further education. Like I am going to the American Beauty Show in Chicago. We've done some educational with product, product vendors, some of those things. I do a lot of self-study. I'm very, it's really interesting. And of course, I don't want this to sound like a brag, although when people say that, they're getting ready to brag, right? But I'm very self-study. A lot of what I know about mental health and awareness, when people sit down and talk with me, people are like, do you have a doctorate degree? What college did you graduate from? And I'm really honest in that I don't have any of those things. What I do have is like this insatiable desire to learn. And it starts a lot with myself. My own husband suffers from an inflammatory scalp condition. In 2020, he nearly died from COVID. Actually, he did flatline and they brought him back. But he had this inflammatory scalp condition that affected him from the top of his head to the sole of his feet. And it just threw me into a thing like, oh, I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. So I decided to get dermatology adjacent and go to the dermatologist and learn what I could. I do have a background, of course, in medical healthcare as well. And so I have kind of a clinical mindset. And so those things supported me, looking for education, doing research, all things that I really do naturally, just because I have a penchant for it. So that's what I've done. I've really done a lot of self-education. I follow your podcast, and especially when you were really going, there's some dermatology consultants even that you have had on the show that I begin to follow on Instagram. And honestly, I gotta say, going back to this, a lot of it came from being at Creative Hair School. Let me just throw this in here. This is the plug. Meeting you and Miss Coco and Mr. Q, one of the things I love is that you all have a holistic mindset around business as a whole. I heard the messages coming in back to Cos School in a way I hadn't before, in that you guys talk about the whole person. I know, like, you guys work out and you have days with the students that you practice body safety and awareness and care, and you bring in professionals. And of course, I went to school in the pandemic. So, kind of in the height of it, I didn't necessarily get that opportunity because things were closed down. But I look at how you've carried that work forward. And I think that all of that influences me. And that's another thing. I follow what's happening at Creative. I do. I follow what you guys are doing there. It's a resource for me. It was my school, but now it's also a resource for my education as well. And so those are things that I do.
That's amazing. And thank you. Thank you a lot. I mean, even to have you as a student was an honor for us. And, we appreciate your presence and the things that you're doing right now in our community. You guys, she's amazing. So you follow her and watch what she does in this industry. Now, I know you do. Also, you can recognize stress within the scalp. So a lot of times when people come in, what are some of those indicators that you can see something is going on with this person, either their health or they're under some stress? What are some of those indicators for you?
Well, some of the things I do then in the initial assessment is I actually, and again, this comes from my clinical background, with permission. I ask my clients permission before I touch their head, even though they're there for an appointment, because hair care is deeply spiritual to me. But then I must acknowledge that everything about my life is connected to the spiritual. Two, what I do is I actually do an assessment that gets their history, their health history, what medications they may or may not be using, with supplements they're on. I even ask them like what's the longest their hair has been in their lifetime. I find out, like, we talk about nutrition, what their diet is like, what their activity is like, how much water intake are they having. We also talk about their relationship with what they identify as stress. We talk about that, and I'm actually even building out a few more things in my process in the upcoming months to really up level the way that I service clients. And I also have digital technology. So I kind of walk a fine line. I'm studying trichology, but have not obtained a trichology certification. But one of the things I do is I have digital devices that allow me to assess, not diagnose or triage the scalp.
Awesome. That is amazing. I love the self-education. I feel like that's where it's at. That's
Yeah.
where it's at. So how can stress impact the hair and the scalp?
Well, stress, when we hear the word stress, people usually think of a negative connotation, but stress can be healthy and it can be unhealthy. Chronic, toxic, ongoing, unresolved stress makes different impacts in the body. When our middle brain, which is the part of our brain that assesses that we're under threat, whether physical, emotional, or otherwise, it begins to send signals through our body so that our bodies can ramp up and say, hey, let's get ready to address this threat. Well, we have these hormones that the body secretes, adrenaline and cortisol, and it comes from the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys. So when we're under stressful events, what it is known now in science that short bursts of stress is not really the issue. Sometimes riding a roller coaster ride or anticipating going on a date or I got a big test, right? But where stress gets dangerous is when it is unresolved and when it is ongoing. When stress is toxic, that means that it is unmitigated. We don't have a healthy soothing method in place. So then when the body begins to dump out this adrenaline and this cortisol, which raises our blood pressure, which causes our pancreas to secrete more insulin, right? Getting ready for threat, which increases our heart rate. Well, just think about that. It's like having your car on and then just sitting in there for 3 hours with your foot on the gas, revving the engine. If you keep doing that, you're going to throw the systems out of whack. And so when our body is dumping out these levels of hormones, stress hormones, what happens is it affects the other hormones in the body. Well, those hormones also affect our hair, our scalp, right? Our blood is what feeds the follicles, feeds the hair bulb so that the follicle can get the nourishment so that the hair can grow out of it. Well, guess what? If those things are under attack, if they're out of balance, if they're not being nourished properly, or if they're not being taken care of well from the inside of our body internally, that sets our hair up for our scalp to experience inflammation, things that come from the environment that can clog the pores of the scalp, which then can make the oil system in our scalp become overactive. So now it's trying to pump out too much oil because it's like, so the hair is dry, but the scalp is oily. And so then all of those things come together and the hair is like, hey, I can only do so much. And so the hair is going to respond. So if that scalp environment is out of balance due to being stressed, and sometimes the environment and the things we do to the hair stress the scalp, like tension and adding products that don't support nourishment to the scalp. So all those things are a part of the stress response, whether it's things that are happening in our life and our body is responding to it internally, or things coming from the environment or practices that we're doing that's bringing external stress to the scalp and hair. Our hair is going to respond. And usually that response is going to be to break, to fall out, to thin. And so the key is to not rid ourselves of stress, but to have a means to recover and to soothe stress.
Wow. Oh, that is so good, girl. I was in class just now for a minute. So last thing, you just talked about that. Let's get into the mindfulness. What can one do to help relieve that stress using mindfulness?
Mindfulness is very important. And really let's just simply put, it's about being mindful versus mindful, right? Our thoughts. Statistics show from neuroscientific research that we think anywhere upward from between 60 to 80,000 thoughts in a day. 80% of those thoughts are not useful. This is why mindfulness matters. Giving yourself the space and the grace to quiet the mind, right? So 2 different things can happen with us in response to how we deal with stress. We can experience depression, which can often be triggered by being pulled into the past, things that are over that we can't go back and change. And so you go down. Depression takes you down. Anxiety, on the other hand, is when our mind starts rolling and ruminating and moving fast. So it's like the speeding car. So what that does, it takes you forward, which means it takes you, that's when we get into those thoughts of the worst thing, the worst case scenario, right? And we're waiting for the boot to drop and all of that. So the key is bringing ourselves into the harmony in the present of now. Mindfulness says, I bring myself away from the things that are unchangeable. I bring myself away from the things that I haven't even, I'm anticipating, but I don't even know what they're going to be yet. And I'm coming back into the now moment. I'm coming back into my body. I'm coming back into the space of realizing that I'm here right now and that I'm safe and that I may not have control of everything, but it's okay. And we do that with a few practical ways. We can use the breath to do that. Deep inhales through the nose, forceful exhales out of the mouth. We just, and what that does is that allows our brain to start to slow down. It diminishes the feeling of threat, which then we can help those chemicals that release for stress, that speed our body up, help slow it down. Another practice that is really good for stress reduction is humming. We have a nerve that attaches most to all organs in our body that kind of ends up at the vocal cords. It's called the vagus nerve. And so a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve and soothe ourselves is by humming. And I thought this was interesting until I learned the science behind it. My baby sister, she hums all the time. And I didn't realize that humming is actually a soothing method. These are things that don't cost you anything. You breathe without even knowing it, right? But there is a technique to use it to reduce stress. People can hum sometimes. You get in a good mood and you hum a song. You're actually stimulating a nerve in your body that's going to soothe stress. So those are just a couple of things that we can do mindfully. And thirdly, the other thing that we can do is movement. Physical functional movement, just like sitting at your computer desk and rolling your wrist, rolling your neck. I'm reading a book called Sacred Rest by Sandra Dalton Smith, and she talks about 7 types of rest. And so physical functional movement, not just our dance or our weightlifting, right? But functional movement is a way to give active rest to the body. And it's also a way to practice being mindful.
Wow, that is amazing. I never thought about that. So what's the name of that book again?
It's called Sacred Rest.
Yes, Sacred Rest.
And it's an amazing book that talks about 7 types of rest. You wouldn't even realize that there are 7 types of rest. And sleep and rest are not the same. Sleep is actually a byproduct of rest. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got it going on, Felicia. You do. I thank you so much for your wisdom. You share so many valuable points on this episode. Like I'm thinking like I want to listen to it again right now because you're just so knowledgeable and you have so much grace about the things that you share and you're so open. People I'm sure they can just gravitate to you and to your teachings. So you know what? I don't know if this is in your plans, but I'm looking for your podcast. I'm looking for your podcast. But I do want to say thank you for showing up today and for educating us and giving us your tips and your wisdom. I really appreciate you and I admire you more than you know. Like I look at you in just amazement. Like from the time you came into the school and came into the classroom or online, because we had to go online.
Yes, we did.
You shared so much with us. You shared so much with us, and it was more than hair. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything that you do. Because you are burning a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me. I shared with someone recently, as I do my work in the community, as I do my work on myself, as I do my work with my family and those who are connected in my circle, the thing that's most important to me when I leave this world is that people who have encountered me will be able to say, when I was with her, I felt safe. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I was able to share this episode with you because it had so much information that I feel we could use for our mental health, self-care, as well as our hair care. Until next time, let's continue to educate, empower, and embrace our essence through the love of natural hair. Thank you for listening.